Hi everyone, I'm Corey Joe, always CJ, and this is Squash Set. This is where I get an entire Magic the Gathering set and squish it down to bite-sized information. In today's episode, we will be talking about Commander Legends Battle for Baldur's Gate. In this set, there is a total of 361 cards. This set is based on the game Dungeons & Dragons. This wouldn't be a Dungeons & Dragons set without dragons, and there is a lot of them. So let's start off with the 5 mythic and the main part of the set. And the first mythic dragon I want to talk about is Ancient Golden Dragon. For 5 and 2 white, you get a creature Elder Dragon that's a mythic. It has flying. Whenever Ancient Golden Dragon deals combat damage to a player, roll a d20. You create a number of 1/1 blue fairy dragon creature tokens with flying equal to the results. It's also a 7/10. Ancient Silver Dragon. For 6 and 2 blue, you get a creature Elder Dragon that's a mythic with flying. Whenever Ancient Silver Dragon deals combat damage to a player, roll a d20. Draw cards equal to the result. You have no maximum hand size for the rest of the game, and it is an 8/8. Ancient Bass Dragon. For 5 and 2 black, you get a creature Elder Dragon that's a mythic. It has flying. Whenever Ancient Bass Dragon deals combat damage to a player, roll a d20. When you do, put any number of target creature cards with total mana value X or less from graveyards onto the battlefield under your control, where X is the result. It is a 7/6. Ancient Copper Dragon. For 4 and 2 red, you get a creature Elder Dragon that's a mythic. It has flying. Whenever Ancient Copper Dragon deals combat damage to a player, roll a d20. You create a number of treasure tokens equal to the result. It is a 6/5. Ancient Bronze Dragon. For 5 and 2 green, you get a creature Elder Dragon that's a mythic. It has flying. Whenever Ancient Bronze Dragon deals combat damage to a player, roll a d20. When you do, put X/1/1 counters on up to 2 target creatures, where X is the result. It's a 7/7. In this set, there is other great dragons such as Earthquake Dragon. For 14 and a green, you get a creature elemental dragon that's a rare. This spell costs X less, where X is the total mana value of dragons you control. It has flying and trample. It also has tap 2 and a green, sacrifice a land, return Earthquake Dragon from your graveyard to your hand, and it is a 10/10. You also get Wrathful Red Dragon. For 3 and 2 red, you get a creature dragon that's a rare with flying. Whenever a dragon you control deals damage, it deals that much damage to any target that isn't a dragon. It is also a 5/5. You also get cool dragons like Colessa Scale Singer. For a green and blue, you get a legendary creature dragon bard that's an uncommon. It has, you may look at the top card of your library any time. You may cast dragon spells from the top of your library, and it's also a 1/4. And Miriam Central Worm. For 3 green, blue and a red, you get a legendary creature spirit dragon that's a rare. It has flying and ward 2. Whenever another non-token dragon enters the battlefield under your control, create a token that's a copy of it, except for that token isn't a legendary if that dragon is legendary, and it is also a 6/6. And for the final part of the dragons, there is an uncommon dragon cycle, and we're first going to start off with Crystal Dragon. For 4 and 2 white, you get a creature dragon that's an uncommon. It has flying and vigilance. It's a 4/4. It also has Adventurous Sorcery. Rob the Horde. For 1 and a white, return target artifact, enchantment or legendary card from your graveyard to your hand. Next up is Sapphire Dragon. For 5 and 2 blue, you get a creature dragon that's an uncommon with flying. Whenever Sapphire Dragon attacks or blocks, scry 2 and it's a 5/6. It has Adventure Instant, Psychic Pulse. For 2 and a blue, counter target non-creature spell. Next is Topaz Dragon. For 4 and 2 black, you get a creature dragon uncommon with flying and death touch, and it's a 4/4. It has an adventure instant, Entropic Cloud. For 1 and a black, creatures you control gain death touch until end of turn. And after that, you get Amethyst Dragon. For 4 and 2 red, you get a creature dragon uncommon with flying and haste, and it's a 4/4. It has adventure sorcery, Explosive Crystal. 4 and a red. Explosive Crystal deals 4 damage, dividing as you choose among any number of targets. And finally, you get Emerald Dragon. For 4 and 2 green, you get a creature dragon uncommon with flying and trample, and it's a 4/4. It has Adventure Instant, Dissonant Wave. For 2 and a green, counter target activated or triggered ability from a non-creature source. It wouldn't be a Magic the Gathering set without Planeswalkers, and in this set there is 3 Planeswalkers. So let's start off with the first one. It's Elmister. For 3 white and a blue, you get a legendary Planeswalker, Elmister. For a mythic. Whenever you scry, the next instant or sorcery spell you cast this turn costs X less, where X is the number of cards looked at while scrying this way. It has a +2, draw a card then scry 2. Its -3 is exile the top card of your library, create a number of 1/1 blue fairy dragon creature tokens with flying equal to the card's mana value. Elmister can also be your commander, and it starts on 5 loyalty. Tasha the Witch Queen. For 3 blue and a black you get a legendary Planeswalker Tasha, that's a mythic. Whenever you cast a spell you don't own, create a 3/3 black demon creature token. Its +1 is draw a card. For each opponent, exile up to 1 target instant or sorcery from that player's graveyard and put a page counter on it. +3, you may cast a spell from among cards in exile with a page counter on them without paying its mana cost. Tasha the Witch Queen can be your commander, and it starts off with 4 loyalty. And finally we have Minx and Boo, Timeless Heroes. For 2 red and a green, you get a legendary Planeswalker Minx, that's a mythic. When Minx and Boo, Timeless Heroes enters the battlefield and at the beginning of your upkeep, you create Boo, a legendary 1/1 red hamster creature token with trample and haste. +1, put 3 1/1 counters on up to 1 target creature with trample or haste. -2, sacrifice a creature. When you do, Minx and Boo, Timeless Hero deals X damage to any target where X is the creature's power. If that sacrificed creature was a hamster, draw X cards. Minx and Boo, Timeless Hero can be your commander, and it starts on 3 loyalty. The next thing we'll be talking about is choose a background. Choose a background is a keyword ability as a partner variant. It's linked together with the background legendary enchantment subtype. You can have a background as your secondary commander, and I will be talking about backgrounds in the next section. The first 2 legendary creatures with choose a background will be the 2 mythics. The first one being Volo, Interior Scholar. For 2 and a blue you get a legendary creature Human Wizard, that's a mythic. When Volo enters the battlefield, create Volo's Journal, a legendary colorless artifact token with hexproof, and whenever you cast a creature spell, note one of its creature's type that hasn't been noted for this artifact. Tap 2 and 8, draw a card for each creature noted for target permanent you control named Volo's Journal. Choose a background. It's a 2/3. Karlach, Fury of Venice. 4 and a red, you get a legendary creature Thieving Barbarian, that's a mythic. Whenever you attack, if it's the first combat phase of the turn, untap all creatures you control. They gain first strike until end of turn. After this phase there is an additional combat phase. It has choose a background, and it's a 5/4. Now we come to the rares that also have choose a background. We're going to first start off with Lizeld Acrobatics Champion. For 2 and a white you get a legendary creature Girth Warrior, that's a rare. If you would put 1 or more counters on a creature or planeswalker you control or on yourself, put that many +1 of each of the counters on that permanent or player instead. Choose a background, it's a 3/3. Next up is Gail, Waterdeep Prodigy. For 2 and a blue you get a legendary creature Human Wizard, that's a rare. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell from your hand, you may cast up to 1 target card of the other type from your graveyard. If a spell cast from your graveyard this way would be put into your graveyard, exile instead. Choose a background, it's a 1/3. And after that it's Shadowheart, Dark Justicator. For 3 and a black you get a legendary creature Human Elf Cleric, that's a rare. 1 and a black, tap, sacrifice another creature, draw X card where X is the creature's power. Choose a background, and it's a 3/4. Next is Vile, Blade of Frontiers. For 1 and a red you get a legendary creature Human Warrior, that's a rare. If you would roll 1 or more dice instead, roll that many dice +1 and ignore the lowest roll. Whenever you roll 1 or more dice, put a 1/1 counter on Vile, Blade of Frontiers, choose a background, and it's a 1/1. And lastly we have Jahiria, Friend of the Forest. For 2 and a green you get a legendary creature Human Elf Druid, that's a rare. Creature tokens you have a tap, add a green mana, choose a background, and she's a 2/3. Next we get to talk about the backgrounds, which are enchantments that interact with a commander that says choose a background. So background is a legendary enchantment subtype. It interacts with your commander. Your commander needs to have choose a background. In this set there is 5 rare backgrounds and no mythics, so I'm going to start off with the first one being Noble Heritage. For 1 and a white you get a legendary enchantment background, that's a rare. Commander creatures you own have, when this creature enters the battlefield and at the beginning of your upkeep, each player may put 2 1/1 counters on a creature they control. For each opponent that does, you gain protection from that player until your next turn. Next is Shameless Charlatan. For 1 and a blue you get a legendary enchantment background, that's a rare. Commander creatures you own have, for 2 and a blue this creature becomes a copy of another target creature. Next is Cultist of the Absolute. For a black you get a legendary enchantment background, that's a rare, with Commander creatures you own get +3/+3 and have flying, death touch, ward, pay 3 life, and at the beginning of your upkeep sacrifice a creature. Next is Popular Entertainer. For 1 and a red you get a legendary enchantment background that's a rare. Commander creatures you own have, whenever 1 or more creatures you control deals combat damage to a player, go target creature that player controls. And lastly, Raised by Giants. For 5 and a green you get a legendary enchantment background that's a rare. Commander creatures you own have base power and toughness 10/10 and are giants in addition to their other type. Next are the gods of the set. This set has a total of 3 gods, and I'm going to start off by talking about Bahal, Lord of Murder. For 2 black, red and a green you get a legendary creature god that's a rare. As long as your life total is less than or equal to half of your starting life total, Bahal, Lord of Murder has indestructible. Whenever another non-token creature you control dies, put a 1/1 counter on target creature and go with it. It is a 4/4. Next is Bane, Lord of Darkness. For 1 white, blue and a black, you get a legendary creature god that's a rare. As long as your life total is less than or equal to half of your starting life total, Bane, Lord of Darkness is indestructible. Whenever another non-token creature you control dies, target opponent may have you draw a card. If they don't, you may put a creature card with equal or lesser toughness from your hand onto the battlefield. It is a 5/2. And lastly we have Micro, Lord of Bones. For 4 white, black and a green you get a legendary creature that's a god. It's a rare. As long as your life total is less than or equal to half of your starting life total, Micro, Lord of Bones is indestructible. Whenever another non-token creature you control dies, you may exile it. If you do, create a token that's a copy of that card, except for it's an enchantment and loses all other card types. It is a 7/5. In this set there's many other creatures that are absolutely amazing. So let's first start off with the tricolours. First we're going to talk about Jahiria, Invoked Adept. For 1 blue, red and a white, you get a legendary creature human wizard that's a rare. It has haste. You may activate abilities of other creatures you control as though those creatures have haste. Tap. When you next activate an ability this turn by spending 4 or more mana to an activated ability, copy that ability. You may choose new target for the copy. It's a 4/4. Zevlor, Eternal Exile. For 1 blue, black and a red you get a legendary creature, Thieving Warrior, that's a rare. It has haste. It has tap to an it. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery that targets only a single opponent or single permanent an opponent controls, for each opponent choose that player or a permanent they control, copy the spell, and then copy the target and the copied target of the chosen player or permanent. It's a 4/2. Next up is Nine-Finger Knee. For 1 black, green and a blue, you get a legendary creature human rogue that's a rare. It has menace, it has ward, pay 9 life. Whenever Nine-Finger Knee deals combat damage to a player, look at the top 9 cards of your library. You may put a gate card from among the cards onto the battlefield. Then if you have 9 or more gates, put the rest into your hand, otherwise put the rest at the bottom of your library in a random order. It's a 4/4. Next is Mazzy True Sword Paladin. For 1 red, green and a white you get a legendary creature, Human Knight, that's a rare. Whenever enchantment creature attacks 1 or more opponents, it gets +2/+0 and gains trample until end of turn. Whenever an aura you control is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, exile it. Until end of your next turn you may cast that card. It's a 3/4. Next we have Jan Jansen Chaos Crafter. For a red, white and a black, you get a legendary creature, Gnome Artificer, that's a rare. It has haste. Tap, sacrifice an artifact creature, create 2 treasure tokens. Tap, sacrifice a non-creature artifact, create 2 1/1 colorless construct artifact creature tokens. It's a 3/3. And finally we have Gorion, Wise Mentor. For green, white and blue you get a legendary creature, human wizard, that's a rare. It has vigilance. Whenever you cast an adventure spell, you may copy it. You may choose new target for the copy. It's a 3/4. Next we'll be talking about the adventurers. There is a cycle of them and they all let you take the initiative. I'll be talking about the initiative after I've talked about these 5 cards. First we're going to talk about White Plum Adventurer. For 2 and a white you get a creature Orc Cleric that's a rare. When White Plum Adventurer enters the battlefield, you take the initiative. At the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, untap a creature you control. If you've completed a dungeon, untap all creatures you control. It's a 3/3. Next is Tomb of Horrors Adventurer. For 5 and a blue you get a creature Elf Monk, that's a rare. When Tomb of Horrors Adventurer enters the battlefield, you take the initiative. Whenever you cast your second spell each turn, copy it. If you've completed a dungeon, copy that spell twice instead. You may choose new targets for the copies. It's a 4/4. Next is Ravenloft Adventurer. For 3 and a black you get a creature, human rogue assassin, that's a rare. Whenever Ravencroft Adventurer enters the battlefield, you may take the initiative. If a creature opponent controls would die, instead exile it and put a hit counter on it. Whenever Ravenloft Adventurer attacks, if you have completed a dungeon, defending player loses 1 life for each card they own in exile with a hit counter on it. It's a 3/4. Next is Caves of Chaos Adventurer. For 3 and a red you get a creature, human barbarian, that's a rare. It has trample. When Caves of Chaos Adventurer enters the battlefield, you take the initiative. Whenever Caves of Chaos Adventurer attacks, exile the top card of your library. If you've completed a dungeon, you may play the card this turn without paying its mana cost. Otherwise, you may play that card this turn. It's a 5/3. And lastly, Undermountain Adventurer. For 3 and a green, you get a creature giant warrior that's a rare. It has vigilance. When Undermountain Adventurer enters the battlefield, you take the initiative. Tap, add 2 green. If you've completed a dungeon, add 6 green instead. It's a 3/4. The initiative. Whenever 1 or more creatures a player controls deals combat damage to you, that player takes the initiative. Whenever you take the initiative, and at the beginning of your upkeep, venture into the Undercity. In this set there are some amazing white creatures. First we're going to start off by talking about Archfist of Ogma. For 1 and a white you get a creature halfling cleric, that's a rare. It has flash. Whenever an opponent searches their library you gain 1 life and draw a card. It is a 2/2. Next is Battle Angels of Thry. For 2 and 2 white you get a creature angel knight, that's a mythic. It has flying and myriad. Whenever Battle Angel of Thry deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. If that player has more cards in hand than any other player, you create a treasure token. If that player controls more lands than each other player, then you gain 3 life. If that player has more life than each player, it's a 4/4. And finally, Windshaper Planeter. For 4 and a white you get a creature angel that's a rare. It has flash and flying. When Windshaper Planeter enters the battlefield during declare attacking step, for each creature you may reselect each player or planeswalker that creature is attacking. It is a 4/4. Next we're going to talk about the other blue rares in this set. First we're going to start off with Displacer Kitten. For 3 and a blue you get a creature cat beast that's a rare. Avoidance. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, exile up to 1 target non-land permanent you control, then return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control. It's a 2/2. Next we have Lizeld Harvester. For 4 and a blue you get a creature horror that's a rare. When Lizeld Harvester enters the battlefield, turn any number of tapped target non-token creatures face down. They're 2/2 horror creatures. It also has adventure sorcery. Plant tadpoles. For X and 2 blue, tap X target creatures. They don't untap during the controller's next untap step. It's a 4/4. And finally, Wizards of Thay. For 3 and a blue you get a creature human wizard that's a rare. It has myriad. Instant and sorcery spells cost 1 less to cast. You may cast sorcery spells as though they had flash. It's a 3/3. In this set there is 2 amazing black rare cards, and we're going to first start off by talking about Elderbrain. For 5 and 2 black you get a creature horror that's a rare. It has menace. Whenever Elderbrain attacks a player, exile all cards from that player's hand. Then they may draw that many cards. You may play lands and cast spells from among the cards exiled for as long as they remained exiled. You may spend mana as though it was mana of any colour to cast it. It's a 6/6. And finally we have Intellect Devour. For 3 and a black you have a creature horror that's a rare. Devour Intellect. When Intellect Devour enters the battlefield, each opponent exiles a card from their hand until Intellect Devourer leaves the battlefield. Body Theft. You may play lands and cast spells from among cards exiled with Intellect Devourer. If you cast a spell this way, you may spend mana as though it was mana of any colour to cast it, and it's a 2/4. And next we will be talking about the other rare red cards in this set. And first we're going to start off with Baylor. For 3 and 2 red you get a creature demon that's a mythic. It has flying. Whenever Baylor attacks or dies, choose 1 or more. Each mode must target a different player. Target opponent draws 3 cards, then discards 3 cards at random. Target opponent sacrifices a non-token artifact. Baylor deals damage to target opponent equal to the number of cards in their hand. And it's a 5/5. Next we have Eternal Surveyors. For 3 and a red, you get a creature thiefling peasant that's a rare. It has trample and myriad. As long as Internal Surveyors is attacking, it gets +X+0, where X is the number of lands defending player controls, and it's a 0/4. And finally we have Furbolg Flutist. For 4 and 2 red you get a creature giant bard, that's a rare. Enthralling Performance. When Furbolg Flutist enters the battlefield, gain control of target creature you don't control until end of turn. Untap it. It gains haste and myriad until the end of turn. It's a 4/4. And finally, we have the greens. There's only 2 of them, so we're going to start off by talking about Bramble Solvent. For 2 and 2 green you get a creature druid that's a mythic. Whenever another non-token creature you control enters the battlefield, you may tap 2. If you do, that creature's controller creates a token that's a copy of the creature. It's a 4/4. And finally we have Owlbear Cup. For 2 and a green you have a creature bird bear that's a rare. Mama's Coming. Whenever Owlbear Cup attacks a player with 8 or more lands, look at the top 8 cards of your library. You may put a creature card from among them onto the battlefield, tapping and attacking that player. Put the rest at the bottom of your library in a random order. It's a 3/3. We are now going to start on the spells of the set, and we're going to start off with sorceries. There's a total of 8, and the first one we're going to talk about is Ascend from Avernus. For X and 3 white you get a sorcery that's a rare. Return all creatures and planeswalker cards with mana value X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Exile Ascend from Avernus. Next we have Barroom Brawl. For 1 and a green you get a sorcery that's a rare. Target creature you control fights target creature and opponent to your left controls. Then that player may copy this spell and choose new target for the copy. Next is Blood Money. For 5 and 2 black you get a sorcery that's a mythic. Destroy all creatures. For each non-token creature destroyed this way, you create a tap treasure token. Next is Call to the Void. For 4 and a black, you get a sorcery that's a rare. Each player secretly chooses a creature they control and a creature they don't control. Then the chosen are revealed. Destroy each creature chosen this way. Next is Eldritch Pack. For 6 and a black, you get a sorcery that's a rare. Target player draws X cards and loses X life, where X is the number of cards in the graveyard. Next is Majestic Genesis. For 6 and 2 green, you get a sorcery that's a mythic. Reveal the top X cards of your library, where X is the greatest mana value of a commander you own on the battlefield or in the command zone. You may put any number of permanent cards from among them onto the battlefield. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Next is Sculpted Sunbursts. For 3 and 2 white, you get a sorcery that's a rare. Choose a creature you control. Then each opponent chooses a creature they control with equal or less power. If you choose a creature this way, exile each creature not chosen by any player this way. To reveal the Outlands. For 4 and a green you get a sorcery that's a rare. Search your library for up to X basic lands where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. Put those cards on the battlefield, tap, then shuffle. The next section I will be talking about are the instants in this set. There are many instances in this set that are very good, and I'm going to first start off with Astion's Thirst. For 3 and a black you get an instant that's a rare. Exile target creature. Put X 1/1 counters on a commander creature you control, where X is the power of the creature exiled this way. Next is Elmister's Simulacrum. For 4 and 2 blue you get an instant that's a mythic. For each opponent you create a token that is a copy up to 1 target creature that player controls. Next up is Gail's Redirection. For 3 and 2 blue, you get an instant that's a rare. Exile tag a spell, then roll a d20 and add the spell's mana value. From 1 to 14 you may cast the exile card from as long as it remains exiled, and you may pay mana as though it was mana of any colour to cast the spell. From 15 plus, you may cast the exiled spell without paying its mana cost for as long as it remains exiled. Next up there's Jahiria's Respite. For 4 and a green you get an instant that's a rare. Search your library for up to X basic land cards, where X is the number of creatures attacking you. Put those cards on the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. Prevent all combat damage that will be dealt this turn. Next we have Lizeld Acrobatics. For 3 and a white you get an instant that's a rare. Exile all non-token creatures you control, then roll a d20. From 1 to 9, return all cards to the battlefield under their owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. From 10 to 20, return these cards to the battlefield under their owner's control, then exile them again. Return those cards to the battlefield under their owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. Next up, Storm's King's Thunder. For X and 3 red, you get an instant that's a mythic. Whenever you cast your next instant or sorcery this turn, copy that spell X times. You may choose new target for the copies. And finally we have a Wild Reversal. For 2 and a red you get an instant that's a rare. Choose target spell or ability with 1 or more targets, roll a d20 and add the greatest power among creatures you control. Between 1 and 14 you choose new target for that spell or ability. 15 plus, you may choose new target for that spell or ability, then copy it. You may choose a new target for the copy. Next up on the list are the artifacts of the set. We're going to start off with the ones with coloured pips, then go on to the colourless, like completely colourless artifacts that are rare and mythics, and then finish off this part with the vehicles. When it comes to this set, there are many amazing artifacts, and some that have adventure. So first we're going to start off with Robe of the Archmage. For 2 and a blue you get an artifact equipment that's a rare. Whenever an equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, you may draw that many cards. Equip cost is 4, unless you equip it to a shaman, a warlock, or a wizard, it's 1. Next is Horn of Valhalla. For 1 and a white you get an artifact equipment that's a rare. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each creature you control and has equipped 3. Yarg's Call. For X and 2 white you get a sorcery adventure. Create X 1/1 white soldier creature tokens. Next up is Wand of Wonder. For 3 and a red you get an artifact that's a rare. Tap 4 and 8, roll a d20. Each opponent exiles cards from the top of their library until they exile an instant or sorcery card, then shuffle the rest into the library. You may cast up to X instant or sorcery spells from among them exiled this way without paying their mana cost. From 1 to 9, X is 1. From 10 to 19, X is 2. If you roll a 20, X is 3. Next up is Altar of Bahal. For 1 and a black you get an artifact that's a rare. Tap 2 black and 8, exile a creature you control. Return target creature card from your graveyard onto the battlefield. Activate only as a sorcery. Bone Offering. For 2 and a black you get a sorcery adventure. Create a tapped 4/1 black skeleton creature token with menace. Packed Weapon. For 3 and a black you get an artifact equipment that's a mythic. As long as Packed Weapon is attached to a creature, you can't lose the game for having 0 or less life. When a crit creature attacks, draw a card and reveal it. The creature gets +X/+X until end of turn and you lose X life, where X is the card's mana value. To equip, discard a card. And finally we have Monster Manual. For 3 and a green you get an artifact that's a rare. Tap 1 green and 8, you may put a creature card from your hand onto the battlefield. It also has Zoological Studies. For 2 and a green you get a sorcery adventure. Mill 5 cards, then return a creature card milled this way to your hand. Next up is the colourless artifacts. There are 5 in total and we're going to start off with Basilisk Collar. For 1, you get an artifact equipment that's a rare. Equipped creature has Death Touch and Lifelink, and equip cost is 2. Next up is Blade of Selves. For 2, you get an artifact equipment that's a rare. Equipped creature has Myriad. Equipped cost is 4. Next up is Fraying Line. For 4, it's an artifact that's a rare. When Fraying Line enters the battlefield, put a rope counter on target creature you control. At the beginning of each play's upkeep, that player may pay 2. If they do, they put a rope counter on the creature they control. Otherwise, exile Fraying Line and each creature with a rope counter on it, then remove all rope counters from all creatures. Mirror of Life Trapping. For 4, you get an artifact that's a rare. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield, if it was cast, exile it, then return all other permanent cards exiled with Mirror of Life Trapping onto the battlefield under their owner's control. And finally we have Vexing Puzzle Box. For 3, you get an artifact that's a mythic. Whenever you roll 1 or more dice, put a number of charge counters on Vexing Box equal to the result. It has tap, add 1 mana of any colour and roll a d20. Tap, remove 100 charge counters from Vexing Puzzle Box, search your library for an artifact card and put it on the battlefield, then shuffle. And finally, when it comes to the artifacts, there is 2 vehicles. So let's first start off with Mighty Servant of Leuko. For 3, you get an artifact vehicle that's a rare. It has Trample, it has Ward, discard a card. Whenever Mighty Servant of Leuko becomes crewed for the first time each turn, if it was crewed by exactly 2 creatures, it gains, whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, draw 2 cards until end of turn. It has crew 4 and it's a 6/6. And finally we have Neutraloid Ship. For 4, you get an artifact vehicle that's a mythic. It has Flying. Whenever Neutraloid Ship enters the battlefield, exile target player's graveyard. Whenever Neutraloid Ship deals combat damage to a player, you may put a creature card exiled with Neutraloid Ship onto the battlefield under your control. It has crew 3 and it's a 5/5. Next, we're going to be talking about the enchantments of the set. In the rare and mythic slot there is a total of 4 enchantments, so I'm just going to get right into it and start off with Descent into Avernus. For 2 and a red you get an enchantment that's a rare. At the beginning of your upkeep, put 2 descent counters onto Descent into Avernus. Then each player creates X treasure tokens, and Descent into Avernus deals X damage to each player, where X is the number of descent counters on Descent into Avernus. Next up is Font of Magic. For 3 and a blue you get an enchantment that's a mythic. Instant and sorcery spells you cast cost 1 less for each time you've cast your commander from the command zone this game. Next up is Kindred Discovery. For 3 and 2 blue you get an enchantment that's a rare. As Kindred Discovery enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Whenever a creature you control of the chosen type enters the battlefield or attacks, draw a card. And finally, Legion Loyalty. For 6 and 2 white you get enchantment that's a mythic. Creatures you control have Myriad. The set won't be called Battle for Baldur's Gate, without gates. So let's start off with these 4 and continue on with the rest. Firstly, it's Baldur's Gate itself. It's a legendary land that's a gate and a rare. Tap for a waste. Tap 2 and it. Add X mana of any one colour where X is the number of other gates you control. Next is Basilisk Gate. A land that's a gate that's a common. It taps for a waste. Tap 2 and it. Target creature gets +X/+X until end of turn where X is the number of gates you control. Activate only as a sorcery. Next is Gond Gate. A land that's a gate that's an uncommon. Gates you control enter the battlefield untapped. You can tap it for a waste. Or you can tap it, add 1 mana of any colour that a gate you control would produce. And finally, Heap Gate. That's a land that's a gate that's a common. Tap for a waste. Tap 1 and it and 1 mana of any colour. Or tap 1 and it. Tap an untapped gate you control. Create a treasure token. And finally, we're going to talk about the last 5 gates. First, we're going to start off with Citadel Gate. It's a land that's a gate that's a common. Citadel Gate enters the battlefield tapped. As Citadel Gate enters the battlefield, choose a colour other than white. Tap, add white, or 1 mana of the chosen colour. Next is Seagate. Land that's a gate that's a common. Seagate enters the battlefield tapped. As Seagate enters the battlefield, choose a colour other than blue. Tap, add blue, or add 1 mana of the chosen colour. Next is Black Dragon Gate. That's a land that's a gate that's a common. Black Dragon Gate enters the battlefield tapped. As Black Dragon Gate enters the battlefield, choose a colour other than black. Tap, add black or 1 mana of the chosen colour. Next is Cliffgate. That's a land that's a gate that's a common. Cliffgate enters the battlefield tapped. As Cliffgate enters the battlefield, choose a colour other than red. Tap, add red or 1 mana of the chosen colour. And finally we have Mana Gate. That's a land that's a gate that's a common. Mana Gate enters the battlefield tapped. As Mana Gate enters the battlefield, choose a colour other than green. Tap, add green or 1 mana of the chosen colour. And finally, we're going to be talking about the 5 lands that come in this set that are reprints of Battleborn and probably one of my favourite lands in existence. Firstly, we're going to be talking about Bountiful Prominence. That's a land that's a rare. Bountiful Prominence enters the battlefield tapped unless you have 2 or more opponents, and it taps for a green or a white. Next up is Spire Garden. It's a land that's a rare. Spire Garden enters the battlefield tapped unless you have 2 or more opponents. It taps for a red or a green. Next up is Luxury Suite. It's a land that's a rare. Luxury Suite enters the battlefield tapped unless you have 2 or more opponents. Taps for a black or a red. Next is Morphic Pool. It's a land that's a rare. Morphic Pool enters the battlefield tapped unless you have 2 or more opponents. Taps for a blue or a black. And finally we have Sea of Clouds. It's a land that's a rare. Sea of Cloud enters the battlefield tapped unless you have 2 or more opponents. Taps for a white or a blue.